Before we begin the Q&A, without formality, just on behalf of the Estoril Festival, which occasionally does these semi-formal kind of moments, I just want to make a brief statement leading to an occasion. The opportunity for us to see all of your work together in this retrospective has allowed students and lovers of your work and audiences, new audiences in Portugal, to see more clearly the great aesthetic and intellectual strengths which hold all of it together. Amongst them, the constantly challenging reality of human beings' position within the natural world and all its complexity, reminding us that we're not gods but physical beings, and that our attempts at divinity are assumed and the source of our perversity, and that our human nature, rather than a description of our incipient evil, as we generally use it, is our true mystery. A singularity of vision, which means that your work's been consistently controversial, but for the right reasons. As we eventually see, when we look at the work, we look back at the work from some years ago, because you challenge conventional ideas about existence, and you take nothing for granted in this exploration, often painful, of desire and identity, and exposing our fear, which is not really of the other, but which is of ourselves. So for these reasons, and for many more reasons, the Estoril Festival, represented by its founder and its director, Paulo Branco, wishes to make a special occasion of this moment. To be that obscure novelist working in Canada doing something else? Or?
Well, things have changed, certainly. When I started, and I started making low-budget horror films, but those were the films I wanted to make. I mean, it only seemed in retrospect that that was a wonderful idea because it was a good way for an inexperienced young director to get a start in film, and I think we've seen many filmmakers have started working in genre. I mean, Francis Coppola made a horror film to begin his career. Scorsese made a gangster film or two to begin his career. Those were all sort of low-budget Corman type exploitation movies, they call them. And I think you can see now still that the horror genre is, the science fiction horror genre is still very, very strong. You know, everybody says, I've heard this many times, that people say, why now? You know, why now are horror films so popular? Because people want to think that the apocalypse is coming, and that's why horror films are being made, or because there is a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that is why horror films are being made. But in fact, they're always being made, and every once in a while, one becomes very popular. And we've just seen that in North America with a small movie, which I haven't seen, called Paranormal Activity, which cost apparently about $15,000 and has made many millions of dollars. And so, and the Blair Witch came along, and then in the old days it was Carpenter doing Halloween and so on. So I think it's the technology that's changing, but the way of watching movies and accessing movies is changing. But the making of movies is not changing. You still have to, the technology does not alter the fact that you have to be able to tell a story, work with actors, have a vision, literally, with your camera, and metaphorically, in terms of the themes and the sort of understanding of the human condition that you have as a filmmaker. Those things haven't changed, and those things will still be in short supply. And I don't want to repeat myself, but most people can now write a letter, or they can write a page, they can write an email. There was a time in human history when only the most elite, the most well-educated and rich and aristocratic could read and write. Everyone else was illiterate. Now, many people can read and write, but it doesn't mean that they can write a novel, you know, it doesn't mean that they can write a screenplay. In other words, having access to the technology of writing doesn't immediately mean that you are an artist who uses words. So those things are still rare, and I don't think that will change. And when I talked about the cinema being dead, well, I mean, the cinema as I knew it as a child is long been dead. You know, it's just completely different. The way that people, I mean, just the fact when you could actually own a movie and have it in your house, and it became like a book that you could take down. You take down your VHS tape, and you watch your favorite scenes, and you watch just the scene in the movie, or you watch it over and over again. When I was a kid, we used to go to the cinema every Saturday. It was like lemmings streaming to the sea. You know, there was a little river of children walking through the streets of Toronto, and believe me, with no parents. I mean, people were not afraid at that point of their children being kidnapped and all those other things. We all would just go to the cinema by ourselves every Saturday, and we'd watch a couple of movies, cartoons, and documentary, and so on and so on. But when you saw that movie, it was gone. If you didn't see it that week, you never saw it again. It was gone. Because the only place you could see it was that day in that cinema. When movies started to be shown on television, that revolutionized everything. That you could see a movie again that you'd seen 10 years ago, and now see it again on television. So all of that has changed, and it's just a continuous thing. I don't think there needs to be fear involved for those who love cinema. I don't think there's a fear that has to be expressed. I mean, I think it's actually quite exciting. I mean, I have an iPhone right here, and I'm ready to shoot my next feature with this iPhone. I'm serious. And I will post it to YouTube the day I finish shooting it.
So like a lot of, you want to work this out? Discussed in the meeting of film schools today, we discussed exactly your point about whether technology was part of innovation or part of tools and about storytelling. Yes, Amy?
Good evening. Well, thank you for being here. We are some students here from all over Europe. I would like to ask you, what advice can you do to young filmmakers like us?
Well, I love to say, you know, forget about film. Because there's not room for you and me, so there are many wonderful careers that have nothing to do with film. But I think beyond that, there is something that I never used to say, but I say now, is that you must, if you want to be in film, you should really be there for the right reason. Everybody talks about celebrity culture, and there are many people who want to be rock stars, and it's not because they have music in their blood, it's because they like the idea of being a rock star. And there are many people who want to be a director, and it's not because they have anything to say through the medium of cinema, but it's just because they like the idea of being a director. And I think that if that is your motivation, then you're likely to end up very frustrated and disappointed. So it really, I think you have to examine your motives for wanting to be involved in film. And if they are the right, if you do have a real passion for it, and if you do have something of the experience of your life that you feel you can express through cinema, then that's different. But you have to know that has to be the real reason that you devote your energy and your life to cinema. And of course, you don't devote your whole life to cinema. I mean, it's wonderful when directors say that cinema is my life. it's not my life. It's a part of my life, but you know, it's not. If cinema disappeared, I'd still be alive, and I would look at those other careers that I'm encouraging you to look at.
Somebody know that? Is there a microphone for someone here?
Good evening, Mr. Cronenberg. I have two questions. One, what is it that you want to say through your films? And two, is it true that you're considering a sequel to Eastern Promises? Thank you.
Yes. No, actually it doesn't. I just say nothing, really. Well, in a way that's true. I mean, I'm not... It's not, you know, there's a very, very famous quotation when someone, you know, it was at Sam Warner, he said, if I want to send a message, I'll use Western Union. You know, Western Union was a telegram. There's some truth in that, because it's not a message, you know, that I have to deliver. When I'm making a movie, I use film to explore my version of the human condition. So when I'm making a movie, I don't know everything. You know, Alfred Hitchcock used to like to say that his movies were like little machines, you know, and they would manipulate the audience, and he could make you cry and laugh at exactly the moment he wanted it. He could be afraid. To me, it's not. My approach is completely different. I don't know what I'm exactly saying. It's more an exploration of things. I find a narrative. I find characters who intrigue me. Who present me with little dilemmas and puzzles, and I try to solve those puzzles and untie the little knots, and that way it reflects to me what my own experience of life is, and all of my films are very personal, really, and that in itself seems unusual, because I have done movies which I've written myself, original screenplays, but I've also adapted novels and a play. But they all are personal. They all become, you mix your blood with them, and with some other person, let's say, who's written a book. And it is a bit like sex, you know, in the sense that you're mixing your DNA to something that you don't have, and I'm delivering it to you, something like that. That's the answer to that.
What about the sequel?
Yes, at this very moment, I think, right at this very moment, Stephen Knight, who wrote the original of Eastern Promises, is working on a sequel, Eastern Promises 2. And it's the first, it's an idea, a basic concept that I have for it, that he's developing. And it's the first movie I've made that I really wanted to make a sequel to, because I wasn't ready to give up Nikolai. I think there's more. I want to see him go back to Russia, see him in his native habitat, and we just do that in the first one. And also I did a lot of research about the Russian mob, and Russia now. It's a fascinating country. It always has been, and it continues to be. And so I wasn't ready to give him up on that sort of tone. So we hope, once again, it will be an independent film. It will be through Focus Features. Will Focus Features survive the indie massacre? I don't know, because a lot of companies like Focus, which are sort of the art film offshoots of major studios, have disappeared. You know, they've all been closing down in America. So it's possible that Focus will not exist long enough to make this, but at the moment we live in hope, and we're trying to make that movie.
Good luck.
Good evening. I was curious about kind of the change that you made, at least in these two last movies you made, Eastern Promises and The History of Promise. Because in my opinion you have this very distinctive aesthetics from all your previous movies, from The Fly and so on, that are very organic and mechanic. And I guess you diverged into a more accessible format and a more accessible communication, but that isn't as distinctive as it was before. So my question is this a new approach that you're planning to exploit, or at a point in time you're planning to go back to that to organic and mechanic communication?
Well, I don't think there's anything more organic than Viggo Mortensen's body. I mean, in truth, I don't really, the making of those movies to me was exactly the same as the making of The Fly, let's say, or Scanners. I mean, it never occurred to me to say to myself, I must now make a gangster movie. And in fact, I've made 2 gangster movies in a row, and I never thought I must now make 2 or 3 or 4 gangster movies. Those movies were the movies that the financing came together on. You know, I mean, this is a strange, when people say, well, what are you planning to do? You know, you're going to do, explore the gangster genre. Well, really, I mean, it would be wonderful to be able to anticipate the next 5 movies that you're going to make. But nobody can do that. And not Martin Scorsese. I mean, he and I have talked about that many times. People think that Scorsese can do anything he wants. Not true. Not true. He has to fight to make every movie. It's very, very difficult. So, first of all, you don't have absolute choice in what you do in movie making. And secondly, my most successful movie was The Fly. So if you're talking about access, which films were accessible, my early films were more accessible than the last 2 films, if you go by the number of people who went to see them. The last 2 films they did okay, but they were not huge successes. So I never thought of them as being particularly more accessible, more mainstream than my early films. Now, I must confess, the movie that I made before them was Spider with Ralph Fiennes, and that movie I knew was not very accessible. That was a labor of love, as they all are, but it is even more, because none of us got paid any money for making Spider. That was the only way we could make the movie. Not Ralph Fiennes, not Miranda Richardson, not Patrick McGraw who wrote the novel, not me, and not the producer. So that was very strange, but at a certain point, the budget was $10 million, and we couldn't raise $10 million for it. We could only raise $8 million, and the only way we could make the movie was to not pay ourselves any money. We knew that it would not be, as you say, accessible. It was a very, extremely difficult, small film. So that film I knew was less mainstream, obviously, than History of Violence. But that was an exception, that movie, that way, Once again, it had to do with the character of Spider, played by Ralph Fiennes. We had prepared the film. We had seen him in his costume. We had designed his hair, because his hair expresses a lot in that movie. And the way he stood and the way he walked. And then the idea that we wouldn't make the movie after that was unbearable. I mean, it literally would have felt like murdering somebody that we loved. So all of us agreed to just make the movie. So, literally for 2 years I had no income just to make Spider, which was not a success anyway, but it didn't, that really wasn't the question. So when History of Violence came along, it was something I wanted to do, and certainly the fact that I actually would get paid to make that movie had something to do with it, because I could not do another Spider. I wouldn't survive. So all of these things come together, and they're all things that you have to deal with when you're making a movie. If you get to the point where you can make a movie, it's not a simple thing. You are juggling many things: your personal life, your financial life, your social life, your married life, and your cinema life. They all have to work together. It's often tricky, and as you get older, it doesn't get easier. It gets more complicated.
I have to say it was very exciting to hear talk about Andy Warhol.
I think you have to put the mic right up. Think of yourself as Mick Jagger, you know? Need a microphone.
Not possible. Okay. I have to say it was very exciting to hear you talk about Andy Warhol and especially that and the Disaster series. And I was wondering if you could talk about other influences in painting and music in your life and your work.
Yeah. Well, certainly when I was, I think, first of all, I must say that living in Toronto, I've always felt that I was halfway between Hollywood and Europe, physically, geographically, and also artistically. I did see all those Hollywood movies when I was a child, and as I grew up, but then in the 60s I gradually began to see what we called in the art film, something that has disappeared in a way, because we would see Bergman and Kurosawa and Fellini and Truffaut, and those films were, when they came to the cinema, that was an event. I mean, people were very excited to have those films appear, and people would go to see them, and so I was very excited by those. But at that point, I did not think of myself as a filmmaker. I really thought that I would be a writer. My father was a writer, not a fiction writer, but he was a writer, and I used to fall asleep to the sound of his typewriter. He also was a gadget freak, so he got the first IBM Selectric in Canada, and that was a very loud typewriter. I really thought that I would become an obscure novelist. I mean, that was really my ambition, to write novels that not too many people would read. And then when I got into film, I thought I would be an obscure filmmaker who would make films that not too many people would see. And that has happened on occasion. Then I realized that there's a problem there, is that if you're very obscure, it's very hard to make your next movie. So the result is that literature, that is to say writing, fiction writing, was probably more of an influence on me as a filmmaker than film. I mean, obviously I absorbed all of those films and learned so much about filmmaking. I never went to film school. When I was starting out, beginning to become interested in film, there were no film schools in Toronto except ones that taught you technology, that you could become a technician, a television technician, let's say. But there were no film schools as we know them now. And I couldn't afford to go to London. There was the London School of Film Technique, and then there was the UCLA Film School. Those were both 3,000 miles away from me, so there was no way I could go to those. So I'm completely self-taught. So I also, a big influence on me was the magazine American Cinematographer. Absolutely. I mean, I remember reading about Francis Coppola's first, well, it wasn't his first movie, but it was maybe his first Hollywood movie. It was called You're a Big Boy Now. And the star of that movie was a friend of mine named Peter Kastner from Toronto, and he was acting in that movie. And I was amazed to see that there was a magazine that actually documented professional filmmaking, that you could just go and buy in a camera store. You could buy this magazine and you could see how they were shooting in movies, and I had no idea how movies were made. And I would read these articles and look at the pictures and also look at the advertising for cameras, for editing systems, for film stock, and for lights and so on, and try to figure out how movies were made. And that was a big influence on me, actually. It was very exciting to me to feel that I had some access to the inside of professional filmmaking. So all of these things, that are not obvious, certainly where the Andy Warhol connection comes in is that my inspiration for making movies physically was not Hollywood. and it was not Europe, because those seemed to be very far away and very difficult and very complicated. You remember you must realize it was the 1960s, this was hippie time. It was do your own thing. You want to be a filmmaker, grab a camera and make a film. That was it. It was easy. Smoke a dope, get your friends together, and make a movie. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. So it was the underground filmmaking that was accessible, and therefore it was underground filmmaking that we looked to for our inspiration. So it was people like Kenneth Anger and Ed Emshwiller, mostly the New York underground because that's very close to Toronto, but some California underground filmmaking as well. And we would have underground film festivals, that is to say, all of these underground filmmakers, and by underground we mean nobody was making money doing this, but those people would come to Toronto and we would have what we call the Cineton. It was a cinema that would show only underground films. So we'd see films that were 5 minutes long, 20 minutes long, 10 minutes long. There were brothers named the Kuchar brothers, remind me a little of the Coen brothers actually, in those days, and they made very funny, interesting films together as brothers. And it was 24 hours. We would see movies, these small movies for 24 hours. We'd come out, and as the dawn was coming up, we'd have some coffee, we'd go back in and watch movies for another 6 or 7 hours. Very exciting. And we would also screen them on the streets. We would hang a sheet on the streets and project, and anybody coming by could see these movies. So that was really, physically and viscerally and emotionally, that was our inspiration, was underground films. And of course Andy Warhol was a huge part of that, the New York underground filmmaking scene. It wasn't Andy as a painter, as an artist, it was Andy as an underground filmmaker that was exciting to us.
Good evening. Once I watched an interview with you, John Mendes and John Carpenter about censorship. Back then, where John Carpenter was releasing The Thing. I think you had Videodrome, I guess. What I'm asking now is, do you still feel censorship, or what kind of censorship exists today?
Did you watch that on YouTube?
Yeah, sure. And it disappeared.
You see, you never die because you're always on YouTube. And they're the most scary things, things that you completely forget about your past.
But they removed it. They removed it. I think there was a censorship, maybe.
I know. Well, the world is a complex place. If you have a film that is distributed in many countries, you are subject to the culture of those countries. And usually it's very difficult to say, I will not allow anybody to cut one frame from my film. Because if you do that, you might find that 10 countries will no longer show your film. And your producer will be very upset because he will try to make the money back that he paid to use the movie. And by restricting him, you are cutting away his financial support. So these are very practical. It's one thing to say, I am a filmmaker who will not compromise and I will not let anybody cut my film. But there are many ways that your film is changed by other people. The cinematographer I used to work with, Mark Irwin, said, it's the projectionist who has the last cut. That was in the days when films were projected. Because the projectionist often would destroy the beginning of each reel and he would cut it tighter and tighter. Sometimes there are many ways that your film can be changed that feels like censorship because it's changed what you were meant to do. I remember Stanley Kubrick was very obsessive about getting the color perfect in his films and doing many, many answer prints that would, just to get the color green correct in each scene and so on. And then when I saw The Shining, I saw it at a small old cinema And one projector was very red, and one projector was very blue, and each time the reel changed, the color changed completely. All of his work was gone. So there are many ways you can be censored. And Crash was censored in Oslo, in Norway. And there was apparently a woman who had control of all the cinemas in that city. And I learned that her husband had been paralyzed in a car crash. And she said it had nothing to do with the fact that she prohibited my movie Crash, which we're about to see, from being shown in Oslo. No, this is just that one city. But people could go to another city nearby, a town, and see the movie, but not in Oslo. It's the strangest, and the other thing is you can't always know where this can happen. I mean, if your film is distributed in Malaysia, I mean, do you go there? Do you watch it? Do you check every cinema? Do you see how your film is being shown? You don't. So it's a complex question, in other words, and what I was talking to John Carpenter about and John Landis and so on had to do mostly with America and with the MPAA. And it was a very specific place and time. There are always people who will want to suppress what you say. You can be sure of that. And you will always have to fight them. You can be sure of that. And the means of suppressing you will always be changing. So you will always have to be vigilant.
Good evening. And it's over there. So we'll take that question first, if you don't mind. Yeah. And we'll come to you in a while.
Do you agree that your movies are centered in the body? When I watch your movies, I recognize that I look through and into the human body, or else the body, in a way. Like I can only remember one cinema genre that concentrates on the human body, and that is pornography. And I think your work, your body of work, centers on the human body. And here in this movie we just saw, there's a line there that says, Carlos says, that the human body is the last, something like that, the last work of art. And my question is, do you think when you look, you haven't seen, and I haven't seen, but James Cameron's next movie with, I believe it's almost all the movies made with digital characters, not flesh actors. And what do you think of that experience? Do you think that's a future for movies, working without actors, or let me just say, the disappearing body? And you that work with the human body, with flesh, what do you think of that as a future for movies?
Very good question. Well, for those of us who read novels, you read a novel, and in that novel, which is created only by words, you have the human body. You have. So there are many ways that you can discuss the physicality of human life, and it can be with something as abstract as words. So I think your understanding of my films is correct, And I do think that the first fact of human existence is the human body. And then again, as a filmmaker, the thing that you photograph most is the human body, the face, the body. Almost every shot you see in a movie involves the human body. So then when you work with actors, of course, their physicality is their instrument. If you're an actor, I mean, I've acted in some movies, and it's a very interesting experience because although you're only maybe 10 meters away from where you are as a director, the experience is completely different. Because as an actor, you have only your body, you're very exposed and you're very vulnerable. And you begin to understand why actors are obsessed with their hair and their skin and the clothes that they wear, because that is their instrument. That's the cello that they play, is their body. So I think movie making in general is very particularly body obsessed, even though maybe the filmmakers don't think of it that way. But I think it's very obvious that that is the essence of cinema, is the human body. And but I don't think it matters how you create that, you see, because when you photograph a person with high definition video digitally, that's a completely different process from photographing someone with film photochemically. And then the images that you're dealing with are no longer actual human bodies, they are abstractions. They are abstractions that people who watch them understand represent the human body, but we don't think it actually is the human body. So there's always a sense of metaphor, of abstraction involved in art that deals with the human condition. Therefore, I must say, I don't think it matters whether the humans in Avatar are generated with computer animation or actual actors. Now, having said that, I like to work with actors because I'm very lazy, and they do a lot of the work. And if I have to create every movement that they make, I'd be exhausted, you know? So I'd rather just tell them to try something and see what happens. It's much easier. Also, as I understand it, in Avatar there actually are humans, the actual actors who were photographed. I've seen the trailer for it. And even the sort of CG creatures, they do motion capture. You know, you use people to capture the motion that you will then animate. So even behind the computer generated imagery, there are human beings. And of course, there are a lot of human beings. I mean, I've heard that Jim Cameron is sort of a human being. So, you know, he's involved. In other words, I think that there are many ways when painters use paint to paint human bodies.
You finished talking about Avatar anyway. I mean, like a lot of very innovative artists, you said the other day, well, I discovered why I made that movie and why that's one of my movies as I'm making the movie and after I've made the movie and I look at it afterwards. A lot of people say that, they have that process of recognizing, okay, this is something to do with me. How often, I mean, now that there's, you know, we're getting close to there being the word Cronenbergian, there's a serious body of work. How often do people get that idea very, very wrong? How often do people say, okay, this is the kind of movie for you, and really misapprehend what your work is, where your work is going?
Yes, it's very common for me to have someone send me a script or a novel and say, this is this is obviously something you'd be interested in. And it absolutely is nothing that I'm interested in. I must say that this man came to me with a project which was something that I loved and was very interested in, but it was not a horror film, it was not a gangster film. It was a novel called Cosmopolis, written by Don DeLillo, who's a wonderful American writer. And if you're a producer, a creative producer, looking to put together a director with a project, that's a real art to do that. It takes a real sensitivity, a very special kind of sensitivity. Agents in Hollywood don't have that sensitivity. They think that you made a horror film 30 years ago and therefore you love horror films, and that's what you want to do. I said, or after I did my last two movies, which were gangster films, suddenly I got a mafia movie that De Niro was going to do, and I got sent nothing but gangster movies. And that wasn't really specifically, that wasn't why I was interested in those two movies. So the thought process of a director, in terms of what he wants to do, is a subtle one. It's a complex one. It's not easy to anticipate what something will run. And it's a kind of special talent.
And it's very hard to go on making your own movies, because after something like The Fly, you get to a point where people are saying, okay, the next one should be 1.5 times that budget, and so on. You're in a position where you have to impose the idea that you're going to go on making films which might be quite similar budgets in order to do your own.
I wish that double the budget thing were true. I don't think it absolutely doesn't work that way. And especially now, given the world economy that everybody talks about, and it's actually true, everybody's looking to cut budgets down and to minimize the risk and so on. So it really, certainly, if you go on IMDb, there's usually sometimes for an actor, there'll be a little list of what he got paid for each movie. This is quite unusual. And it always, you see double, and triple, and quadruple, and then suddenly it drops again, So you might wonder what's going on. But there are no rules about that. Obviously, if you're an actor who suddenly hits in Nicolas Cage was not a highly paid actor until he made Leaving Las Vegas and won an Oscar. That was a very low budget movie, and suddenly he was getting paid, $20 million. But he wasn't getting paid $20 million to do Leaving Las Vegas 2, although he died in the first one, so it could be a ghost story. I have to make a phone call. Wait a second.
One last question.
Well, hi. This is more out of curiosity. I was wondering, this is regarding the casting process. During the development of a project, when writing, do you think of an actual lead actor for a specific role? Like, for instance, when doing Eastern Promises or History of Violence, did you actually thought of Viggo Mortensen for that sort of role, or it just came along? And if not, when do you get to that point when you say to yourself, this is the guy I want for my lead role?
Well, casting is a black art, It's a magical, strange, evil kind of process. Because so many things are involved in getting your actor. The first thing is he the right person for the role? But then it's also, can you afford him? Does he want to do it? And is his name, is his presence enough to support the budget that you have? You cannot do a movie for $120 million without a substantial, an actor of Tom Cruise or somebody like that. But to go back to the creative part, I normally do not want to think of an actor when I'm writing a screenplay because I feel that I will begin unconsciously or consciously to shape the role for that actor and for that actor's strengths and also for his limitations. I'd rather let the character express itself on the page the way it must within the script without thinking of an actor first. And then only then, when the character has come alive in the screenplay, am I really willing to think of a specific actor. Now with Vigo, who I love and adore, and is just a fantastic person as well as an amazing actor. History of Violence, that was the first time I worked with him. We considered many other actors, there were many discussions and so on, including Nick Cage, for example, was considered. And when an actor is really good at a role, it becomes almost impossible to think of somebody else playing that role. But before you've actually made a movie, you think of many people. You know, it's important to think of many people and to challenge yourself and to say to yourself, all right, well that's an obvious choice, but maybe is there some actor who's a more unusual choice for this role who would bring something interesting to it? So at that point it's a very interesting conversation, and you have that conversation with several people. If you have a good casting director who's very sensitive to you, the woman I've worked with for many, many years knows the tone of actor that I like. You know, she knows which actors I would not be interested in, and so she can really help me discover which actors might. You know, you get a list of actors literally who you might consider. And if you have Hollywood agents involved or English agents, they send you lists of everybody that they can think of who might play that role. And sometimes the lists are very ridiculous because the role is for somebody who's 29 and they tell you Anthony Hopkins and they just completely ignore it. They just throw it out there. But you sort of have to ignore that. But you often get messages from actors through their agents saying that so-and-so would really, really love to play this role. And I like that. I appreciate that because there was a time when no one wanted to be in my movie. Crash was not an easy movie to cast. Dead Ringers, I went to 30 actors who all said no before I met Jeremy Irons, who said maybe. He was the first one. And he was the first one who wasn't American or Canadian. The list of the actors that I approached for Dead Ringers encompasses some of the best American and Canadian actors you've ever heard, and they all were afraid to play that role. But Jeremy was not afraid. He was just perverse enough, you know, he's English. So you have to find the right actor who will not be afraid of what you're wanting to do. And for me, it's a collaboration. It's a big collaboration. But if the actor has fear and will constantly be pulling back, that's another thing. You have to make sure that your actor is not afraid to play that role. Even The Fly, a very simple thing. We approached several actors for The Fly before Jeff Goldblum, and they were afraid of the rubber. You know, they were afraid to have that much makeup on them. They felt they couldn't act through the makeup. And Jeff was not afraid. He was very playful, and he was confident that he could animate the rubber and make it work, because it was before CG, so that wasn't even a nice question. So there are many strange things that you have to consider in terms of casting. Now, when I got the script for Eastern Promises, and I saw the role of Nikolai, I said, Vigo, you know, that's who I want for that role. Because it had always occurred to me when we were making History of Violence that Vigo, although he's half Danish and half American, that he looked Slavic somehow. His cheekbones, he felt Russian to me for some reason. And also, he speaks many languages. You know, he was raised in Argentina, so his first language was actually Spanish. And he speaks Danish, and he speaks some French and some German. And I needed an actor who was very good with languages and not only could convincingly speak Russian, which is a very difficult language to learn if you're not Russian, and who also could do a perfect Russian accent when speaking English. These are there are some fantastic actors who cannot do accents. You know, you need a very musical ear. And Viggo also is a composer. He's a musician as well. It's a musical thing, an accent. You know, you have to have an ear. If you can't sing music, you have a very hard time learning another language because you can't find the music of that language. So all of those things said to me, Viggo is the right one for that role. And as soon as I read the script, that's what I wanted. And if Viggo had not wanted to do it, I might not have done that movie.
Thank you. We're about to see Crash, and I don't know whether you want to say 2 words about David Ballard, who was the guy who was the...
I just want to say that this is not Paul Haggis's Crash. Those of you who are expecting that, you should leave right now. This movie did not win any Academy Award. J.G. Ballard, who wrote the novel Crash, has died recently. And he wrote some very ferocious, difficult, hard novels, but he was the sweetest, most wonderful man. I loved him. I had the best time with him at the Cannes Film Festival when Crash first was unleashed on the world and caused quite a big scandal. And I was there. We had a press conference. It was about this many people. They had to find a special place for the press conference because so many people wanted to attack us. And I was there sitting up with all my actors, my producer, Jeremy Thomas, and J.G. Ballard. And the first thing that happened was a Finnish journalist got up and said, "How could you make this movie? You have destroyed this brilliant book. You have not gone as far as the book. You mutilated the book. It's a crime. It's a scandal." And then Ballard said, "Well, actually, I think the movie is better than the book." And that's the kind of guy he was. I mean, he was a wonderfully strong colleague in arms. We had a fantastic time at Cannes, and I really miss him. I'm sure he would be delighted to see you all here watching this movie because he was very happy with the movie and